By the summer of 1945, Japan was on its last leg. For the past several years, the Allies had been engaging in an island-hopping campaign, capturing key Japanese holdings in the Pacific. Japan's industrial capabilities had also been dealt with massive blows by the heavy firebombing of their cities. Meanwhile, in the United States, researchers at the Manhattan Project began to put the final touches on one of their products, an atomic bomb. Capable of creating explosions thousands of times more powerful than TNT, the researchers saw the weapon as a war-ending and potentially war-preventing tool. With Germany out of the conflict following their surrender on May 7th, the Allied forces focused their combat elements entirely on Japan to end the war once and for all. On May 10, 1945, a group of high-ranking military officers and scientists called the Target Committee met to discuss potential atomic bombing targets in Japan. According to General Leslie Groves, the United States Army officer in charge of the Manhattan Project, an optimal target needed to fit a series of requirements. The target should have some sentimental value to the Japanese people so that its instantaneous destruction would rock the seemingly unbreakable Japanese morale. The target should also have military assets, like forts, equipment foundries, or naval bases. Lastly, the target needed to have been largely untouched by the war and needed to be large in order to demonstrate the true power of the weapon. Cities that had been ravaged by firebombings like Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka were left off the list. 2 weeks after the May 10th meeting, 4 cities were established by the chief scientists working on the project as optimal targets: Kyoto, Yokohama, Kokura, and Hiroshima. Soon enough, an updated list of targets was produced. Hiroshima and Kokura remained, but 2 new cities were added: Niigata and Nagasaki. As the first nuclear test occurred in the deserts of New Mexico in mid-July, President Harry S. Truman was in Germany meeting with Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill. He was in constant communication with the Target Committee, discussing when, where, and how to drop the bombs. On July 25th, he and several members of the committee signed an order saying that the aforementioned cities should be bombed as soon as the weather permitted, following August 3rd. The next morning, Truman and the other Allied leaders announced that, should Japan not surrender unconditionally immediately, it would face prompt and utter destruction. On July 29th, the Japanese rejected the ultimatum. 1 week later, in the early morning hours of August 6, 1945, Colonel Paul W. Tibbets boarded his B-29 bomber Enola Gay. His mission was clear: drop the 5-ton Little Boy nuclear device over Hiroshima. At 8:15 in the morning, the Enola Gay centered its sights on the T-shaped Aoi Bridge in the center of the city. The cargo bay doors opened and the bomb was released. 43 seconds later, Little Boy detonated. In an instant, the force of 15,000 tons of TNT exploded over the city, eviscerating the center. 90% of the people within a mile from the blast site died instantaneously. The mostly wooden buildings of the city were flattened, and exploding windows filled the buildings left standing with glass shards. It is estimated that 70,000 people died in the immediate wake of the blast, and thousands more died in the following weeks and months due to injuries and radiation poisoning. Several hours after the explosion, President Truman's voice was carried over the airwaves. The US had just detonated a new massive weapon over Japan, and would continue to do so until Japan surrendered. American planes began dropping leaflets on Japanese cities, telling them that they were, quote, in possession of the most destructive explosive ever devised by man. On August 9th, the American bomber Boxcar made its way to Kokura, but was dissuaded from dropping its bomb there due to the weather. It then moved on to its secondary target, Nagasaki. At 11:02 in the morning, the Fat Man nuclear device exploded over the city, generating an explosion equivalent to 21,000 tons of TNT. 60,000 were killed almost instantaneously, and 10,000 more would succumb to similar wounds to those who survived the initial blast at Hiroshima. With the threat of more bombings of this sort, as well as the declaration of war the previous day by the Soviet Union, the Japanese emperor ordered the military to seek a surrender. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced his nation's surrender, saying, "The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage, and that the Americans had developed a new and most cruel bomb." On September 2nd, the war finally came to a close with the signing of an official surrender instrument aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Harbor.